The HOA president's voice cracked as he begged into the phone, "Please, Marcus, our cattle are dying. The wells are dry and you're the only one with water for miles." But Marcus Coleman wasn't taking calls anymore. Not after they'd laughed at his well permit, called him a wannabe rancher, and tried to shut down his dream. Now, as 2,500 head of cattle bellowed in the scorching heat and the HOA's pristine lawns turned to dust, Marcus held the key to their survival, and he was enjoying every second of their desperation. Marcus Coleman's hands shook as he folded the letter from the Whispering Pines Homeowners Association. The words blurred together through his rising anger: denied, inappropriate for neighborhood character, agricultural activity strictly prohibited. 3 months of paperwork. 3 months of hopes. 3 months of planning his future on the 40-acre plot he'd inherited from his grandfather, and they'd shot it down in a single paragraph. "You okay, honey?" Sarah called from the kitchen, her voice carrying that careful tone she'd been using since he'd been laid off from the tech company. "Just peachy," Marcus muttered, crumpling the letter. Outside his window, the sprawling McMansions of Whispering Pines stretched across what used to be Coleman family farmland. His grandfather's original homestead, this modest ranch house, now sat like a stubborn weed among the manicured lawns and circular driveways. The doorbell rang, and Marcus's jaw clenched. He knew that sound, the pretentious Westminster chime that every house in the HOA was required to install. Through the peephole, he saw Reginald Thornton III, the HOA president, flanked by 2 other board members. Thornton's silver hair was perfectly styled despite the Texas heat, and his polo shirt probably cost more than Marcus's monthly grocery budget. Marcus opened the door but didn't invite them in. "Marcus." Thornton's voice carried the false warmth of a used car salesman. "I trust you received our correspondence regarding your little agricultural venture." "My well permit," Marcus said flatly. "Yes, well." Thornton's smile faltered slightly. "You understand our position. Whispering Pines is a premier residential community. We simply can't have farming operations disrupting the aesthetic we've worked so hard to maintain." Behind Thornton, Carol Hensley, the HOA treasurer and owner of the neighborhood's largest mansion, snorted. "Aesthetic? Let's be honest, Reggie. The man wants to play cowboy on 40 acres. It's ridiculous." "Now, Carol," Thornton chided, but his eyes gleamed with amusement. "I'm sure Marcus understands that his grandfather's rustic lifestyle simply doesn't align with modern community standards." Marcus felt his face flush. "Rustic lifestyle? My grandfather built this community. He sold the land to your developer at a fraction of what it was worth because he believed in progress. The only reason I still own this plot is because he kept it in the family. And we are grateful for his contribution," Thornton said smoothly. "But times change. The water table in this area is precious. We can't have amateur well diggers disturbing the aquifer that supplies our entire community." "Amateur?" Marcus's voice rose. "I have a degree in hydrogeology. I've spent 5 years working for the State Water Commission. I know more about aquifers than what?" Carol interrupted, her voice dripping with condescension. "Than our professional contractors. Than the geological surveys we commissioned when we built our cattle operation." Marcus blinked. "Cattle operation?" The third board member, James Prescott, stepped forward. He was younger than the others, with the soft look of inherited wealth and the confidence that came with never having to work for anything. "The Whispering Pines Cattle Company. We've been planning it for months. 2,500 head of premium Black Angus. It's going to be quite the operation." You're putting a cattle ranch in the middle of a residential HOA. "It's different," Thornton said quickly. "This is a professional, managed operation. Clean, efficient, profitable. Not some hobby farm with a few chickens and a vegetable garden." "I never said anything about chickens," Marcus said slowly. "I applied for a well permit. That's all." "But we know where it leads," Carol said with a dismissive wave. "First a well, then livestock, then you'll want to start selling vegetables at some roadside stand. Before you know it, we'll have tourists driving through our neighborhood, ruining our property values." "Property values," Marcus repeated. "That's what this is about. Partly, Thornton admitted. But also community standards. We've built something special here, Marcus. A place where successful people can live without worrying about the past creeping back in. The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. The past. His grandfather's legacy. His family's history on this land. The answer is no, Thornton continued. The well permit is denied. If you need water, you're welcome to hook into the community system like everyone else. Though I should mention that agricultural use isn't covered under the residential rate structure. Of course it isn't, Marcus said. Now, if you'll excuse us, Prescott said, checking his gold watch, we have a meeting with the contractors. The cattle operation breaks ground next month. We are actually quite excited about it. Should add significant value to the community. As the three men walked back toward their gleaming SUVs, Marcus heard Carol's voice drift back. Honestly, the nerve of some people. Playing farmer in the middle of civilization. Their laughter echoed across the manicured lawns. Marcus stood in his doorway for a long moment, watching them drive away. Then he pulled out his phone and dialed a number he'd memorized but never used. Rodriguez, well drilling, came the gruff voice. This is Marcus Coleman. I need to talk to you about drilling a well. You got your permits? Marcus looked at the crumpled letter in his other hand. I'm working on it. Can't help you without permits, son. HOA giving you trouble? Something like that. Well, I'll tell you what. I've been drilling wells in this county for 30 years. I know every aquifer, every geological formation, every water table. You want my advice? I'm listening. Don't mess with the HOA. They got lawyers, money, and connections. They'll make your life hell. What if I told you I knew something they didn't? A pause. What kind of something? Marcus looked out at the vast expanse of whispering pines, at the perfect lawns that required thousands of gallons of water daily, at the massive homes with their swimming pools and water features. He thought about his grandfather's geological surveys, the ones he'd found in the old man's desk after the funeral. The ones that showed exactly where the water table was deepest, where the aquifer was most stable, where a well could tap into the underground river that had flowed beneath this land for thousands of years. The kind of something that might make them regret laughing at me. You talking about revenge, son? I'm talking about water rights. And I'm talking about justice. Another pause. You know what you're doing. Marcus thought about the folder in his grandfather's desk, about the geological surveys the HOA had never seen, about the fact that his property sat at the head of the aquifer that fed the entire region. He thought about Thornton's smug smile, Carol's dismissive laughter, Prescott's casual arrogance. I know exactly what I'm doing. When you get those permits, you call me back. I will. Marcus hung up and walked back into his house. In the kitchen, Sarah was making dinner, her movements efficient and quiet. She'd been walking on eggshells since his layoff, afraid to push him when he was already down. How did it go? She asked without turning around. They said no. Oh, honey. I'm sorry. Marcus pulled out his grandfather's folder and spread the geological surveys across the kitchen table. Sarah, look at this. She wiped her hands on a dish towel and joined him. What am I looking at? Water table maps. Aquifer depths. Groundwater flow patterns. Marcus pointed to a spot on the map. This is our property. And this. He traced a line with his finger. This is where all the water comes from. Sarah studied the maps. She'd been an environmental science major before switching to nursing, and she understood what she was seeing. Marcus, this shows that you're sitting on the primary recharge zone for the entire aquifer. Exactly. Every drop of water in this region comes from underground rivers that flow right under our land. But that would mean whoever controls the water at the source controls the water for everyone downstream. Sarah's eyes widened. Including the HOA. Including their new cattle operation. Marcus, what are you thinking? He looked at his wife, this woman who'd stood by him through job losses and disappointments, who'd believed in his dreams even when he'd stopped believing in them himself. I'm thinking that my grandfather didn't just leave me 40 acres. He left me something a lot more valuable. What's that? Leverage. Outside, the sun was setting over whispering pines, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. The automatic sprinkler systems were kicking on across the neighborhood, sending thousands of gallons of water arcing across perfect lawns. The sound of the sprinklers was like rainfall, a constant whisper of consumption and waste. Marcus folded the geological surveys and put them back in the folder. Tomorrow, he'd drive to the county courthouse. He'd file the paperwork himself, go around the HOA directly to the county water authority. He'd use his grandfather's surveys, his own credentials, and the leverage that came with owning the source. The HOA had made their position clear, they didn't want him drill. Marcus woke to the sound of his phone buzzing relentlessly on the nightstand. The display showed 4:47 a.m. and 17 missed calls from various numbers. He grabbed the phone and answered the 18th call without looking at the caller ID. This is Marcus. Mr. Coleman, thank God. The voice was frantic, unfamiliar. This is Tom Bradley from the Whispering Pines security office. We have a situation. Marcus sat up in bed, instantly alert. What kind of situation? The cattle, sir. Something's wrong with the cattle. Through the bedroom window, Marcus could see the first pale light of dawn breaking over the development. In the distance, he could hear something that made his blood run cold, the sound of hundreds of cattle in distress, their bellowing creating a symphony of panic that carried across the entire community. I'll be right there, Marcus said, already reaching for his clothes. Marcus. Sarah's voice was thick with sleep. What's happening? I don't know yet. But it's not good. He dressed quickly and drove toward the cattle operation, following the sound of distressed animals. As he crested the hill behind the residential area, the full scope of the disaster became clear. In the pre-dawn light, he could see hundreds of cattle clustered around empty water troughs, their movements agitated and desperate. Several animals were down, lying motionless in the dirt. Dr. Vance was already there, moving between the animals with practiced efficiency. She looked up as Marcus approached, her face grim. How bad is it? He asked. Bad. We lost 12 head overnight. Dehydration, heat stress, and complications from both. The rest are in various stages of distress. Marcus felt a knot of guilt tighten in his stomach. The water line was supposed to be connected yesterday. It was. That's the problem. She led him to one of the water troughs where a thin trickle of water was flowing from the supply line Rodriguez had installed. The flow was barely enough to keep the trough from running completely dry. This is maybe 5 gallons per minute, Dr. Vance said. We need at least 200 gallons per minute to meet the basic needs of this herd. That's impossible, Marcus said. My well produces 50 gallons per minute. Even accounting for the supply line loss, we should be getting at least 40. Then something's wrong with your well, or something's wrong with the connection. Marcus pulled out his phone and called Rodriguez. The well driller answered on the third ring, his voice rough with sleep. Rodriguez, we have a problem. The cattle operation is only getting 5 gallons per minute. That can't be right. I tested that line myself yesterday. It was flowing at 38 gallons per minute. Well, it's not now. Can you get out here? On my way. While they waited for Rodriguez, Marcus walked among the cattle with Dr. Vance. The animals were clearly suffering, eyes sunken, breathing labored, movements listless. Several more had collapsed since his arrival. How long do we have? Marcus asked. At this rate, we'll lose another 50 head by nightfall. Maybe more. Jesus. Mr. Coleman, I need you to understand something. This isn't just about the HOA's investment anymore. This is about animal welfare. If we can't solve this water problem in the next few hours, I'm going to have to recommend emergency slaughter for the most distressed animals. The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. Emergency slaughter. Hundreds of cattle killed not 4, food, but because they were dying slowly of thirst. There has to be another solution. If there is, we need to find it fast. Rodriguez arrived 20 minutes later, his truck loaded with testing equipment. He went straight to the connection point where the supply line met the main water distribution system for the cattle operation. Found your problem, he called out after a few minutes of investigation. Marcus and Dr. Vance hurried over to where Rodriguez was kneeling beside a metal junction box. What is it? Marcus asked. Sabotage. Rodriguez pointed to a series of valves inside the junction box. Someone deliberately restricted the flow. See these valves? They are supposed to be fully open. Instead, they are barely cracked. Sabotage. Dr. Vance's voice was sharp with disbelief. Who would do that? Marcus stared at the valves, his mind racing. Someone who wanted to make sure the water supply failed. Someone who wanted to make me look like I was going back on my word. The HOA board? Rodriguez asked. Has to be. They couldn't stand the idea of being dependent on me, so they sabotaged their own water supply to make it look like I was the problem. But that's insane, Dr. Vance protested. They are killing their own cattle. No, Marcus said grimly. They are killing their own cattle to frame me. Then they'll claim I reneged on our agreement, use that as justification to break the deal, and probably sue me for damages. Rodriguez was already working on the valves, opening them to their proper positions. This should restore full flow in about 10 minutes. Dr. Vance, Marcus said, I need you to document everything. Photos, timestamps, witness statements. This is evidence of criminal sabotage. I'll document it, but right now my priority is getting these animals hydrated. As Rodriguez finished with the valves, Marcus heard the sound of vehicles approaching. A convoy of expensive SUVs was making its way toward the cattle operation, led by Thornton's silver Mercedes. Here we go, Marcus muttered. The HOA board. Members climbed out of their vehicles with theatrical urgency. Thornton was dressed in what looked like a costume version of ranch wear, new jeans, pristine boots, and a cowboy hat that had never seen a day of actual work. Marcus. Thornton called out, his voice carrying across the pasture. What the hell is going on here? We have dead cattle. Yes, we do, Marcus replied calmly. Because someone sabotaged the water supply. Sabotaged? Carol Hensley's voice was shrill with indignation. Don't you dare try to blame this on sabotage. You promised us water, and you failed to deliver. I delivered exactly what I promised. Someone else made sure it didn't reach the cattle. That's a serious accusation, Prescott said, his voice cold. Do you have any proof? Rodriguez stood up from the junction box, his hands black with grease. I got your proof right here. These valves were deliberately closed. This wasn't equipment failure or system malfunction. This was intentional. Valves malfunction all the time, Thornton said dismissively. That doesn't prove sabotage. It does when the valves are brand new and designed to fail in the open position, Rodriguez replied. Someone had to physically close these valves with a wrench. And they had to know exactly what they were doing. Even if that's true, Carol said, how do we know you didn't do it yourself? You could have sabotaged your own system to cover up the fact that your well isn't producing what you claimed. Marcus felt his temper flare. Why would I sabotage my own water supply? What possible benefit would that give me? Plausible deniability, Prescott said smoothly. You make a deal you can't keep, then create a convenient excuse for why it's not working. That's ridiculous. Is it? You're the one with access to the system. You're the one who knows how it works. You're the one with motive to make us look bad. Dr. Vance stepped forward, her voice cutting through the accusations. Gentlemen, I don't care who did what to whom. I care about these animals. The water is flowing now, but we've already lost 15 head, and more are critical. This entire situation is unconscionable. Dr. Vance is right, Thornton said, his voice taking on the grave tone of a politician addressing a crisis. This is about animal welfare now. Marcus, your well clearly isn't adequate for our needs. We need to find an alternative water source. Immediately. The well is fine, Marcus said. The sabotage is the problem. Even if we accept your sabotage theory, Carol said, the fact remains that we can't depend on a system that can be so easily compromised. We need a more secure water source. More secure? Marcus laughed bitterly. You mean more controllable? You mean a water source that you control instead of me? We mean a water source that won't fail when we need it most, Prescott said. The only failure here is your integrity, Marcus shot back. You sabotaged your own water supply to get out of our deal. Prove it, Thornton said. The challenge hung in the air like a gauntlet thrown down. Marcus looked at the 3 HOA board members at their carefully composed expressions of injured innocence and realized he was looking at something more dangerous than simple arrogance. He was looking at calculated malice. I will prove it, he said quietly. And when I do, you're going to wish you'd never heard my name. We already wish that, Carol muttered. Dr. Vance cleared her throat. If you're all finished with your territorial disputes, I need to focus on saving these animals. The water is flowing now, but we need to get the critical cases to emergency care immediately. Of course, Thornton said, his voice full of false concern. Dr. Vance, you have our full support. Whatever you need. What I need is for you people to stop playing games with these animals' lives. As the veterinarian walked away, Marcus found himself alone with the 3 board members. The morning sun was fully up now, casting long shadows across the pasture where hundreds of cattle were finally able to drink their fill. This isn't over, he said. No, it's not, Thornton agreed. But it's not going the way you thought it would, is it? What do you mean? You thought you had us over a barrel. You thought you could dictate terms, make demands, force us to accept your conditions. But you made one crucial mistake. What's that? You forgot. Marcus jolted awake at the sound of splintering wood and shattering glass. Sarah screamed beside him as another shot punched through their bedroom window, sending glass fragments across the hardwood floor. Get down! Marcus yelled, rolling off the bed and pulling Sarah with him. They hit the floor hard as a third shot shattered the mirror above their dresser. Marcus! Sarah's voice was high with terror. What's happening? Someone's shooting at the house. Marcus crawled toward the window, staying low. Outside, he could see muzzle flashes from the tree line that bordered his property. Call 911. Sarah fumbled for her phone while Marcus made his way to the gun safe in their closet. His hands shook as he entered the combination, retrieved his hunting rifle, and checked that it was loaded. 911, what's your emergency? He heard the dispatcher say. Shots fired at 1247 Coleman Road, Sarah said, her voice barely controlled. Someone's shooting at our house. Another volley of shots peppered the exterior wall. Marcus could hear bullets thudding into the wooden siding, the sharp crack of windows breaking, the metallic ping of rounds hitting the well equipment outside. The well equipment? They are trying to destroy the well, Marcus said, the realization hitting him like a physical blow. Marcus Coleman, a voice shouted from the darkness outside. This is what happens when you mess with the wrong people. Marcus recognized the voice, James Prescott, the youngest HOA board member. But the shots were coming from multiple positions, which meant Prescott wasn't alone. You've got 10 minutes to turn the water back on, another voice called out. This one sounded like Thornton. 10 minutes, or we start putting holes in more than just your house. Marcus crawled to the window and peered through the darkness. He could see at least 4 muzzle flashes spread across the tree line. 4 shooters, maybe more, armed with what sounded like hunting rifles. Deputies are en route, Sarah whispered, still on the phone with 911. ETA 8 minutes. 8 minutes. Marcus looked at his rifle, then at the multiple shooters outside. He was outnumbered and outgunned, and they had him pinned down in his own house. Coleman. Prescott's voice again. We know you're in there. You want to play hardball. Let's play hardball. A sustained burst of gunfire erupted from the tree line, bullets raking across the front of the house. Marcus heard his truck's windshield explode, heard the metallic screaming of rounds hitting the well's control panel. They weren't just trying to intimidate him. They were systematically destroying his ability to control the water supply. "Sarah, I need you to get to the basement," Marcus said. "Lock yourself in the storm cellar and don't come out until the deputies arrive." "I'm not leaving you." "Sarah, please. I can't fight them if I'm worried about you getting hit by a stray bullet." Another volley of shots punched through the living room windows. In the distance, Marcus could hear something that made his blood run cold, the sound of diesel engines starting up. "They've got heavy equipment," he muttered, looking through the bedroom window toward the road. Through the darkness, he could see the lights of what looked like a bulldozer and an excavator moving up his driveway. "Oh God," Sarah breathed, seeing the lights too. "They are going to destroy everything." Marcus made a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. He opened the bedroom window, took careful aim at the nearest muzzle flash, and squeezed the trigger. The shot echoed across the property like thunder. The muzzle flash he'd been aiming at went dark, and he heard a scream of pain from the tree. "Line!" "He's shooting back," someone yelled. "Take cover." The return fire was immediate and devastating. Bullets shredded the window frame around Marcus's head, forcing him to duck back inside. But he'd accomplished his goal. He'd shown them that he wasn't going to be a passive victim. "Marcus Coleman, you just made the biggest mistake of your life." Thornton's voice carried clearly across the darkness. "You think you can shoot at us? You think you can threaten members of this community? You shot first." Marcus yelled back. "You're on my property with guns." "Your property?" Carol Hensley's voice joined the chorus. "This stopped being your property the moment you declared war on this community." The sound of heavy machinery was getting closer. Marcus could see the bulldozer's headlights sweeping across his front yard, heading straight for the wellhead. "They are going after the well," he told Sarah. "If they destroy the control system, I lose all leverage." "What are you going to do?" Marcus looked at his rifle, then at the approaching bulldozer. The machine was armored enough that his hunting rifle wouldn't do much damage, but the operator might be vulnerable. "I'm going to stop them." "Marcus, no. The deputies will be here any minute." "Any minute might be too late." Marcus ran through the house toward the back door, staying low to avoid the windows. The gunfire had slackened slightly. The shooters were probably repositioning to support the heavy equipment. He slipped out the back door and made his way toward the well, using the shadows of the outbuildings for cover. The bulldozer was 50 yards away and closing fast, its blade raised to smash into the well's control panel. Marcus took a prone position behind his grandfather's old tractor and lined up his shot. The bulldozer's cab was illuminated by the machine's own lights, and he could see the operator clearly, a man in coveralls who was definitely not one of the HOA board members. A hired gun. They'd brought in professionals. Marcus aimed for the cab's side window and fired. The bullet starred the safety glass but didn't penetrate. The operator ducked but kept the machine moving forward. Marcus fired again, this time aiming for the headlights. The shot was perfect. One of the main lights exploded in a shower of sparks, leaving half the bulldozer in darkness. But the machine kept coming. 20 yards from the wellhead, the bulldozer's engine suddenly coughed and died. The operator tried to restart it, but nothing happened. In the sudden silence, Marcus could hear the distant wail of police sirens. "Engine trouble," Marcus called out. "Maybe you should have checked the fuel lines before you started this party." The operator kicked open the cab door and dropped to the ground, pulling a pistol from his belt. "You sabotaged my equipment." "I improved it," Marcus replied. Amazing what a single well-placed bullet can do to a diesel fuel line. The sound of sirens was getting louder. Red and blue lights were visible through the trees, sweeping along the main road toward Marcus's property. "Coleman." Thornton's voice carried across the darkness. "This isn't over." "No, it's not." Marcus yelled back. "But when those deputies get here, you're going to have a lot of explaining to do." The gunfire from the tree line resumed, but it was sporadic now, desperate. The shooters were probably trying to extract before law enforcement arrived. Marcus heard car engines starting up, the sound of vehicles moving quickly away from his property. By the time the first deputy's cruiser came screaming up his driveway, the attackers had melted back into the darkness. But they'd left evidence behind. The disabled bulldozer sat in Marcus's front yard like a smoking monument to their desperation. Shell casings littered the tree line. And most importantly, Marcus had wounded at least one of them. Sheriff Ray Kowalski was a 30-year veteran who'd seen everything the county could throw at him, but even he seemed shaken by the scene at Marcus's property. "You're telling me that HOA board members shot up your house with hunting rifles?" he asked, surveying the damage by flashlight. "I recognized voices," Marcus said. "Prescott and Thornton for sure. Probably Hensley too. And they brought heavy equipment. Bulldozer and an excavator. The dozer's right there." Marcus pointed to the disabled machine. "Operator ran when you guys showed up, but he left his equipment behind. We'll dust it for prints." "What about the shooters?" "At least 4 positions in the tree line. I can show you where the shell casings are." "You said you returned fire." "They shot first. I was defending my property and my family." "Anyone hit?" "I think I winged one of them. Heard a scream from the tree line after my first shot." Sheriff Kowalski nodded grimly. "We'll check the local hospitals." This kind of escalation. "Marcus, I've got to ask. What the hell is going on here? 3 days ago, you people were arguing about well permits. Now we've got a shooting war." Marcus looked at his house, at the shattered windows and bullet holes, at the well equipment that had been damaged but not destroyed. "It's about power, Ray. It's about people who think they can do whatever they want because they have money and connections. And now they've crossed a line. This isn't about water rights anymore. This is about attempted murder. You want to press charges?" "Damn right I want to press charges. But first, I want to know why you didn't arrest them when they drove away." Sheriff Kowalski's expression darkened. "What makes you think they drove away?" "I heard car engines, Marcus. We didn't pass any vehicles leaving your property. And we had units positioned on all the access roads." The implications of the sheriff's words hit Marcus like a cold wave. "You're saying they are still here?" "I'm saying they are either still here, or they know this area well enough to disappear without using the roads." "They know the area," Marcus said grimly. "They live here. Which means they'll be back." Marcus looked at his damaged house, at his frightened wife standing in the doorway wrapped in a bathrobe, at the well equipment that represented his family's legacy and his con. The lawyer's office smelled like old leather and expensive cologne, the kind of place where deals were made and lives were destroyed with the stroke of a pen. Marcus sat across from David Brennan, the most expensive water rights attorney in Texas. Watching the man's face grow increasingly pale as he read through Marcus's grandfather's documents. "Jesus Christ," Brennan muttered, setting down the geological surveys. "Marcus, do you understand what you have here?" "I understand it's more than just water rights to my property. This isn't just water rights. This is control of the entire Edwards Aquifer recharge zone for 3 counties. Your grandfather didn't just own the water under his land, he owned the water under everyone's land." Brennan spread out a detailed map of the region, tracing lines with his finger. "Look at this. The primary recharge zone starts here, on your property, and extends underground for 40 miles in every direction. Every well, every municipal water system, every agricultural operation in 3 counties draws from water that originates on your land." Marcus felt his stomach tighten. "What does that mean legally?" "It means you don't just have senior water rights, you have absolute water rights. Under Texas law, whoever owns the recharge zone has priority over all downstream users. You could shut off water to 3 entire counties and it would be completely legal. 3 counties: Harris County, Montgomery County, and Walker County. Combined population of almost 6 million people. Marcus, you're not just fighting the Whispering Pines HOA. You're sitting on the most valuable water rights in the state of Texas." Marcus thought about the federal agents, about their threats of eminent domain, about the way they treated him like a terrorist for controlling his own water supply. How valuable? Brennan consulted his notes. Conservative estimate: $50 billion. If you were to lease these rights to municipal authorities and agricultural users, you'd be looking at revenue streams that would make you one of the wealthiest men in America. 50 billion. That's conservative. In a drought year, when water becomes truly scarce, these rights could be worth 10 times that much. Marcus sat back in his chair, his mind reeling. Why didn't my grandfather ever use these rights? Because your grandfather was a farmer, not a water baron. Look at this. Brennan pulled out another document. He filed a declaration of beneficial use in 1952, stating that he was claiming the water rights for agricultural purposes only. He specifically waived any commercial development rights. But I didn't sign that waiver. No, you didn't. And under Texas water law, when beneficial use rights transfer to an heir, the new owner can refile for expanded use. You could claim full commercial development rights tomorrow. What would that do? It would give you legal authority to control water distribution for the entire region. Every municipal authority, every agricultural operation, every residential development would have to negotiate with you for water access. Marcus thought about the Whispering Pines cattle operation, about 2,500 head of livestock that depended on his goodwill for survival. What about the people who are already using the water? Tough shit, Brennan said bluntly. They've been using your water without permission for decades. Under Texas law, you can demand compensation for past use and terminate future access at will. Even the city water systems, especially the city water systems, municipal authorities have been drawing millions of gallons per day from your aquifer without paying you a dime. You could shut off water to Houston tomorrow and it would be completely legal. The implications were staggering. Marcus wasn't just fighting a local HOA, he was sitting on the legal authority to control water for 6 million people. The federal agents who had threatened him, the state officials who had tried to intimidate him, the wealthy HOA board members who had tried to destroy him, they were all completely dependent on water that belonged to him. There's more, Brennan said, pulling out another set of documents. Your grandfather's original land grant included mineral rights, timber rights, and something called perpetual easement authority. What's that? It means you have the legal right to grant or deny access to any infrastructure that crosses your property or draws from your aquifer. Pipelines, power lines, communication cables, if it touches your land or your water, you control it. The fiber optic cables that carry internet to half the county run through my property. They do. And the power lines that supply electricity to Whispering Pines. And the natural gas pipeline that feeds the municipal system. Your grandfather's easement rights are so broad that you could literally shut off electricity, internet, and water to the entire region. Marcus felt a cold smile spreading across his face. How long would it take to file the paperwork for the expanded water rights? I could have it filed this afternoon. For the easement enforcement, that's more complicated, but we could have preliminary injunctions in place within 48 hours. Do it. Marcus, you need to understand what you're talking about. If you exercise these rights, you'll be going to war with some of the most powerful people in Texas. Municipal authorities, agricultural conglomerates, energy companies, they'll all come after you with everything they have. They are already coming after me with everything they have. The difference is, now I know I have the legal authority to fight back. This could destroy your life. My life is already destroyed. But maybe I can build something better from the ashes. Brennan nodded slowly. All right. But I want you to understand that once we file these papers, there's no going back. You'll be the most hated man in Texas and also potentially the most powerful. I'd rather be hated and powerful than liked and powerless. Then let's go to war. The paperwork was filed at 3:47 p.m. on a Friday afternoon, exactly 72 hours after the shooting at Marcus's house. By Monday morning, the legal landscape of 3 counties had fundamentally changed. Marcus woke to find his phone buzzing with hundreds of missed calls. Messages from reporters, government officials, corporate lawyers, and people he'd never heard of who claimed to represent various interests that would be affected by his water rights claim. But the call that mattered came at 8:15 a.m. "Mr. Coleman. This is Mayor Patricia Valdez from the city of Houston. We need to talk." Marcus smiled. The mayor of the fourth largest city in America was calling him personally. "I'm listening." "Sir. I'm sure you're aware of the legal filings made on your behalf regarding water rights in the Edwards Aquifer system." "I'm aware. Mr. Coleman, you're claiming authority over water that supplies drinking water to 4.5 million people in the Houston metropolitan area. Surely you understand that this is not a matter we can simply negotiate away." "I understand that. You've been using my water without permission for decades. I understand that under Texas law, I have every right to charge for that use or terminate it entirely." "Sir, you're talking about holding an entire city hostage." "I'm talking about exercising my legal property rights. If that seems like hostage taking to you, maybe you should examine your assumptions about who actually owns the water you've been taking for free." "Mr. Coleman, let's be practical. What do you want?" Marcus had been thinking about this question for 3 days, ever since Brennan had explained the full scope of his rights. What did he want? Revenge against the HOA board members who had tried to destroy him. Money. Power. "I want respect," he said finally. "I want acknowledgement that I'm not some small-time operator who can be pushed around by people with more money and better connections." "You have that acknowledgement. Now what else?" "I want compensation for decades of unauthorized water use. I want formal agreements for all future use. And I want guaranteed protection from any government agency that tries to seize my property or revoke my rights." "Mr. Coleman, the federal government doesn't negotiate with what? With property owners. With American citizens exercising their legal rights. With people who hold essential infrastructure hostage." "Mayor Valdez, let me make something very clear. I'm not holding anything hostage. I'm simply asserting my legal ownership of resources that belong to me. If that creates problems for you, I suggest you start thinking about solutions that don't involve taking my property away from me." "What kind of solutions?" "The kind that recognize that I'm the senior rights holder for the most valuable water system in Texas. The kind that treat me as a partner rather than an obstacle. And if we don't..." Marcus looked out his window at the Whispering Pines development, at the perfect lawns and swimming pools and water features that represented millions of gallons of his water being used without his permission. "Then you'll find out what Houston looks like without water." The mayor's silence stretched for almost 30 seconds. When she spoke again, her tone had changed completely. "Mr. Coleman, I think we should meet in person. Are you available this afternoon?" "I'm available. But the meeting happens on my property, at my convenience, with my lawyer present." "Of course. Whatever you prefer." After hanging up, Marcus called Brennan. "How did it go?" the lawyer asked. "The mayor of Houston wants to meet this afternoon. I think we got their attention." "Marcus, you need to be prepared for what's coming next. Once word of this gets out, you're going to be the most famous man in Texas. And not in a good way." "What do you mean?" "I mean that by Tomo." The news broke at exactly 6 a.m. on a Tuesday morning, 3 weeks after the meeting with Mayor Valdez. Marcus was drinking coffee on his porch when his phone buzzed with a breaking news alert: Whispering Pines HOA board arrested in federal corruption probe. He opened the news app and smiled as he read the headline story. FBI agents had simultaneously raided the homes of Reginald Thornton III, Carol Hensley, and James Prescott at dawn, arresting all 3 on charges of conspiracy, fraud, embezzlement, and attempted murder. The investigation had been swift and thorough. Once the federal authorities realized they'd been manipulated into threatening the man who controlled water for 6 million people, they turned their considerable resources toward uncovering the truth about the HOA board's activities. What they found was worse than Marcus had imagined. The Whispering Pines Cattle Company had been a massive fraud from the beginning. The board members had solicited investments totaling $40 million for the operation, but less than $10 million had actually been spent on cattle and infrastructure. The rest had been diverted to offshore accounts controlled by the board members. The cattle operation had been designed to fail. The board had known their wells wouldn't produce enough water, had known the operation was unsustainable, and had planned to blame the failure on Marcus's interference while keeping the investor money for themselves. The shooting at Marcus's house hadn't been a desperate response to his water cutoff, it had been a calculated attempt to eliminate the one person who could expose their fraud. Marcus's phone rang as he finished reading the article. The caller ID showed Sheriff Kowalski. Morning, Ray. Marcus, I owe you an apology. A big one. You were doing your job. I was doing what I was told to do by people who were lying to me. There's a difference. What's the latest? The three of them are in federal custody. No bail. The prosecutor thinks they'll all flip on each other trying to cut deals. What about the cattle operation? That's the interesting part. Turns out the investors want to keep it running, but they want new management. Someone with actual expertise in water rights and agricultural operations. Marcus set down his coffee cup. What are you saying? I'm saying they've offered you the job. Full management authority, equity stake, and a salary that would make most CEOs jealous. They want me to run the operation they tried to destroy me for opposing. Ironic, isn't it? Turns out the investors did their homework after the arrests. They discovered that you're not just the guy with the water rights, you're also the most qualified person in the county to manage a large-scale cattle operation. Marcus thought about the 2,500 head of cattle that had been caught in the middle of this war, about the animals that had suffered because of human greed and stupidity. What about Dr. Vance? She's already on board. Says she'd be happy to work under your management. Apparently, she's been telling everyone who'll listen that you saved those cattle by getting the water flowing again. I'll think about it. Take your time. But Marcus, the job comes with something else. What's that? A formal apology from the county, the state, and the federal agencies that threatened you. Turns out that when you control water for 6 million people, a lot of important folks suddenly remember their manners. After Sheriff Kowalski hung up, Marcus walked through his house to the kitchen, where Sarah was making breakfast. She looked up as he entered, her face showing the strain of the past 3 weeks. Good news, she asked, nodding toward his phone. The best. They arrested all 3 board members. Federal charges. No bail. Sarah's relief was immediate and visible. It's really over. The criminal part is over. But there's more. Marcus explained about the job offer, about the investors' desire to salvage the cattle operation, about the formal apologies that were coming from various government agencies. Are you going to take it? Sarah asked. I don't know. Part of me wants to. The cattle need proper management, and I do have the expertise. And the other part? The other part wants to focus on the water rights. Brennan thinks we could build an empire with those rights. Not just licensing fees, but infrastructure development, agricultural expansion, maybe even municipal partnerships. An empire, Sarah repeated. Is that what you want? Marcus looked out the kitchen window at the Whispering Pines development. At the houses that had been built on his family's land, at the community that had grown up around resources that had always belonged to him. I want to build something that lasts, he said finally. Something that honors what my grandfather started, but something bigger than what he could have imagined. What does that look like? I'm not sure yet. But I know it doesn't look like revenge. That afternoon, Marcus drove to the county courthouse for a meeting he'd been anticipating for weeks. In the main conference room, representatives from dozens of municipalities, agricultural operations, and corporate interests had gathered to negotiate water rights agreements. Marcus entered the room with Brennan at his side, surveying the assembled crowd. Mayor Valdez was there, along with representatives from Houston, Austin, San Antonio, and smaller cities throughout the region. Agricultural conglomerates, energy companies, and real estate developers filled the remaining seats. Ladies and gentlemen, Brennan announced, thank you for coming. As you know, my client has legal authority over water rights for the Edwards Aquifer Recharge Zone. We are here today to establish a framework for fair and sustainable water use agreements. A man in an expensive suit raised his hand. Mr. Coleman, I'm Robert Harrison from Lone Star Agricultural. We operate 12,000 acres of farmland that depends on water from the aquifer. What kind of licensing fees are we looking at? Marcus had spent weeks preparing for this moment, working with Brennan and a team of economists to develop a pricing structure that would be profitable but not punitive. For agricultural use, Marcus replied, we're proposing a tiered system based on crop type and acreage. Basic food crops would be licensed at minimal rates. Cash crops and luxury agriculture would pay market rates. What's the difference? Growing corn to feed cattle, minimal rates. Growing decorative landscaping for golf courses, market rates. A murmur of approval went through the agricultural representatives. Marcus was making a distinction between essential and non-essential water use, something that would benefit working farmers while charging premium rates for wasteful consumption. Mayor Valdez spoke next. Mr. Coleman, what about municipal water systems? You mentioned $50 million annually for Houston. What about smaller cities? Municipal rates will be based on population and consumption patterns. Cities that implement aggressive conservation measures will pay lower rates. Cities that allow wasteful consumption will pay premium rates. That seems fair, said the mayor of a smaller city. But what guarantees do we have that you won't arbitrarily raise rates or cut off service? You'll have the same guarantees any utility customer has, Marcus replied. Formal contracts, regulatory oversight, and legal protections. I'm not interested in being a dictator. I'm interested in being a responsible steward of a vital resource. The negotiations continued for hours, covering everything from industrial use to residential consumption to emergency protocols. Marcus found himself drawing on knowledge he'd gained from years of working with water systems, but also on lessons his grandfather had taught him about fairness and community responsibility. As the sun set outside the courthouse windows, a preliminary agreement began to take shape. Municipal authorities would pay annual licensing fees based on population and consumption. Agricultural users would pay tiered rates that favored food production over luxury crops. Industrial users would pay market rates with incentives for conservation and recycling. Most importantly, a regional water authority would be established with Marcus as the senior partner, giving him oversight of water distribution while providing oversight and transparency for his decisions. This is groundbreaking, said Dr. Elena Rodriguez, a water policy expert from the University of Texas. You're essentially creating a new model for resource management that balances private property rights with public necessity. That's the idea, Marcus replied. Water is too important to be treated as just another commodity, but it's also too valuable to be given away for free. As the meeting concluded and the various representatives filed out of the conference room, Mayor Valdez approached Marcus. Mr. Coleman, I want to thank you for your reasonableness in these negotiations. A month ago, I thought you were going to hold the entire region hostage. A month ago, I thought you were going to let federal agents seize my property without due process. Touché. But this arrangement you've proposed, it's actually going to save Houston money in the long run. $50 million per year is less than we were spending on emergency water purchases during the last drought. Good water management benefits everyone. Indeed it does. Mr. Coleman, I hope this is the beginning of a productive partnership. As Marcus drove home through the Whispering Pines development, he noticed changes that had occurred over the past few weeks. The perfect lawns were still green, but they were smaller now, with more drought-resistant landscaping. The elaborate water features had been replaced with more conservative designs. Swimming pools were being covered and equipped with recirc